Welcome, everyone. I don't know if any of you all are NPR fans, but I cut on the radio about midday Saturday. I forget whether it was Troy or maybe out of Atlanta. And the show was about Ethiopia. And I thought, this is fortuitous. Very exciting. I mean, what are the chances? I'm thinking about Ethiopia all day, and suddenly there was a show. It wasn't happy, believe me, because there is little that is happy there. It is a troubled part of the world. But obviously, it's important to us, the ancient Abyssinia, which is today's Ethiopia, and known as a land that is perhaps 2/3 Christian, 1/3 Muslim. You want to get to religious specifications, but one that is very interesting and very significant in the history of Africa, to which we will get. But in the case of both Ethiopia and, of course, Spain, the relationship of the two future sidekicks, because we don't have Germany and Italy in the relationship that they are going to have soon enough. But the issues of Abyssinia, Ethiopia, and Spain will be very, very important in the development of that relationship. So I decided that we could spend some time with them and thinking about how that will play into this relationship, because believe you me, people in the 1930s were talking about it, even though Ethiopia was, for most in Europe, a place fairly exotic and remote, understandably so. Okay. To start, let's notice Italy and Germany in the past. Some of you will remember, if you ever have a review test, I know people I can count on in here who will make A's. Yeah. Others can make B's, but not a special one. You know your dates. And the idea, of course, Italy and Germany are both what I would call new kids on the block, which sounds odd, but for those of us who are Americans, we seem kind of old in comparison with Italy and Germany. Think Garibaldi, Mazzini, Cavour, Bismarck. That brings you a lot of, I know, heart beating fast, but you think about the founders of Italy and Germany. And it's to understand that because of their relative newness, we appreciate the fact that when Italy decided to jump ship and become an ally in 1915, as opposed to 1914, as some of you are all too well aware, that the Italians had originally been in one relationship and then went to another, that now, as one of the allies, the Italians are going to attend the Paris Peace Conference and say, yeah, we were right there and beating up on the Germans. So now, what are we going to get? You say, was it that obvious? I think it was. You could just ask Woodrow Wilson what he thought. I think it was pretty obvious. I don't think they were very subtle and saying, like a tip, we would appreciate any kind of contribution, to my college fund or something. I think it was pretty obvious that the Italians were there for what they could get. But they didn't get it. And they were frustrated. It's not good to be a country in frustration, is it? But the Italians were definitely frustrated in the 1920s, leading, of course, to Il Duce, boss. And we understand that Italy was not a happy place. However, they definitely were the sort of patron / friend of the now independent Republic of Austria. Remember, I hope that you'll recall that in 1919, the Austrians asked to be part of Germany. And they were told by the peacemakers, "You're kidding me." Yeah, you don't really think we would do that, do you? The answer is 9. Yeah. So that was the end of that. So the Italians had a vested interest in maintaining Austrian independence. And we'll see that play out. And of course, like the other allies, they agreed to support the Locarno agreements. And while I think it's fair to say the British and the French had certain issues with Mussolini, they wanted to keep him on their side, which is odd in a way. It's kind of like that. Remember that old game, Keep Away? You don't want the other side to get him, but so you got to keep him. We got to keep Il Duce, but we don't really like him. And Il Duce, I mean, he had problems with the British and French. And of course, he had problems at home. You realize he had to deal with a king, and that was very frustrating because, you know, the German situation, we don't have to deal with kings. We got rid of the emperor after World War I. And von Hindenburg died, remember, in the summer of 1934. So Hitler had no opposition, so to speak. But every day Mussolini had, as Il Duce, had to go in and give reports to the king. And I mean, you know, that can be very stressful when you want to be numero uno. Think about it. Because that, and of course, we understand how that's going to work out. In any event, the Germans will always be more powerful than the Italians. And there is an understanding about that. And their relationship is to a great extent affected by the existence of Austria, which is coveted by Adolf Hitler, his native home. So, with that set up, we can go ahead, I think, to the map of Africa. And Lord, is that complex. Luckily, you don't have to, it won't be on the phone. So imagine one of my great ideas of a sadistic game would be to give you a map quiz. I know, with no markings, and watch you. Torment, you know, teacher's inferno. Yeah, no, I wouldn't do that. But again, this has little to do with 21st century Africa. When I was a boy, all this was being transformed. So, you know, this is incredible when you think about it. All the changes that were coming about probably in the 50s. And by the time we were in high school, you know, all new maps, kind of like people in the 90s with the Cold War. Remember? So, our concern is, of course, with Abyssinia or Ethiopia, and understanding that the Italians, I guess, like any Chamber of Commerce had interest in getting in on African development, which we do here. And we know about that word development, and you know what it means. And of course, a lot of this has to do with East Africa. The Italians understood that as, shall we say, movers and shakers in Africa, they were never going to be in the level of the British and French. So you have to deal with that, come to terms, and, not get depressed about it, because they did get some goodies as a result of World War I. Now, when you see the purple, you're going to say Colonel Gaddafi. I know you will. You'll get excited, but not excited in a good way, I trust. But that is Libya, up there in northern Africa, the purple area. As the Ottoman Empire was spread out, shall we say, you can have this and you can have that, a little bit here, a little bit there. The Italians got Libya. And, it's sort of like Christmas present. You really didn't want. Oh, nice. Yeah. Oh, what did I say? Grazie. Yeah. I'm thinking sore loser, but they got a little Northern African territory. And of course, everybody gets little pieces of what today we call Somalia. And there were a lot of Americans who were from Somalia. So, but back then they were parts of Somaliland. Not that we have to know that much about it. It's just that you're aware there will be an Italian area and there will be a British area and a French area. So it's like we can all exploit. Let's just share, paternalism, imperial style. Do you see all that next to the mustard color, kind of like Grey Poupon, isn't it? Right over there, you see there. And some of you are going to think about Eritrea, problems, huh? Ethiopia's landlocked today, but that area there is to be understood. Get over here a little bit so to make sure you see all of this territory there, the various Somalilands, and you think, well, I wonder if there was a sense of cooperation. Well, there was a sense of rivalry, but this is all what we call Somaliland today, Somalia. And we understand that it will be very significant because a day that I suspect is still celebrated in Ethiopia in 1896. Okay, a date, learn this and do not forget it. You don't know where or when I will be. Could be at a great party and then suddenly I'm there ruining things for you. 1896, and that is the vowel. I say Adawa, but many people will say Adwa. You take your choice. You don't want that vowel there. You don't have to. You're free. Adawa, Adwa, but the battle basically was the effort of the Italians to go in and annex part of Ethiopia, and to the chagrin of the Italian monarchy at that time. Because I mean, it's an act of aggression, clearly. I mean, it's not like they were invited in by the Ethiopians. They were obviously not. But the Ethiopians beat them back. So the Italians are, how would you say this? Chagrined? Yes, I think. Embarrassed How can we go to an imperialist meeting and hold up our heads? Yeah, I mean, it's kind of embarrassing because you think all the cool kids have all these, African territories, and we got Libya, that's nice. And we got a little Somalia, but we wanted a lot more. And your feelings are hurt, and you have self-image, problems, need to see an Italian counselor. Yeah, to get over those issues. But seriously, it will become an issue for the Italians in terms of Ethiopia, and they're not going to be over it by this particular time. You say, well, had Mussolini gone on to bigger and better things? Well, no. I mean, it's again a question of expansion. And he did compare it to the Roman Empire and did talk about, as Il Duce, I'm going to do what I need to do in Eastern Africa. And the British and French obviously have problems with that. Think about it for a minute. It's not like they're going to say, oh, we just want you to be happy, Benito. I don't think so. So that is part of the issue at hand in terms of the interest. The economic interests of the Italians in Ethiopia and the desire of the current emperor, Haile Selassie, his family, to maintain themselves. Haile Selassie was very young, and some of us actually will recall, before your time, 1975, yeah, I know, long time ago, he was passed away. So it was said, now we believe he was strangled to death. I know it sounds like one of our murder mysteries, doesn't it? But in fact, that the press, that the people who set up the coup in Ethiopia at the time, now it was all a long time ago, but he had a long rule, there's no question about that. But I don't think matters in Ethiopia have gotten too much better, even whether or not they were supposed to be Marxist military, whatever that is. And then they've had various rulers and people who claim to be democratic, and they come and they go, and it's just a mess. And then, of course, the war with Eritrea. But the problems of East Africa, as interesting as they are, need not concern us here. The attack, and I love the way it's described in the New York Daily News. As you can probably see, here particularly, they show what they call tribes and then the Italian troops going in. This was truly an act of aggression, although I'm sure they set up some scenario to make it look. And the Daily News, the New York Daily News, probably cost a couple of pennies in the fall of 1935. And I just thought it was kind of interesting how it was portrayed with the photographs of the Italian troops, because as usually happens in wars, and think about Russia, Ukraine, they think, oh, we'll just go in and it'll be over in a day or two or a couple of weeks, and then we'll be home in Milan for Christmas, and that sort of thing. But of course, the Ethiopians had other plans, and the Ethiopians thought that someone was going to help them out. And that, of course, is part of the story here. You say, ooh, That man looks familiar in a bad way. Yes, I'm sure he does. The initials are P.L. And you know him. And you go, ugh, Pierre Laval. Yeah. He was then the foreign minister of France, and he's speaking in, you guessed it, Geneva at the League of Nations. So I'll let him and his British counterpart do some talking for us. Can I do that? Can you do that, Sherry, or do I need to do it?
Sir Samuel Hoare is making his memorable speech, in which he restates in the strongest terms Britain's support for the League. And above all, he says, we stand for collective resistance to all acts of unprovoked aggression.
Therein is the British attitude towards the Covenant. I cannot believe that that attitude will be changed so long as the League remains an effective body and the main bridge between the United Kingdom and the continent remains intact.
The French Premier, M. Laval, speaks for France.
La France est fidèle au pacte. Elle ne peut manquer à ses obligations.
France is faithful to the League covenant. She will not fail in her obligations.
Sir Samuel Hoare nous a dit avant-hier la volonté du Royaume-Uni d'adhérer sans réserve au système de la sécurité collective. Je m'en réjouis avec mon pays. Je parle au nom d'un pays qui ne redoute pas la guerre, mais qui la hait.
Sir Samuel Hoare told us of Britain's desire for collective security. I rejoice in that desire, speaking in the name of a country which does not fear war but hates it. And M. Laval ends by saying, France will not betray the League.
Nos obligations sont inscrites dans le pacte. La France ne s'y soustraira pas.
Okay.
Automatically closed captioned. In my experience, those videos are hard to understand.
I know. Thank you. It's just one of those, but we get the idea. I wanted you to see that because Laval and Sir Samuel Hoare, who was the British foreign minister of the day, they get up there in Geneva and talk a tough game. See this? You try some act against the peace, you're gonna risk getting beaten up. And you say, yeah, right. I'm not so sure Il Duce was too impressed. Ethiopia, Abyssinia had joined the League years ago. As far as I'm aware, well, maybe Liberia was a member. I was thinking about if there were any African members of the League of Nations, but most of Africa, of course, was part of somebody's empire, right? So I think Liberia was the only other independent country. I mean, of course, South Africa, but it was white ruled. So as far as black ruled, it would have to be both Ethiopia and who, by the way, was nominated and supported by Italy, which is very ironic when you think about it. On the other hand, I'm sure that the Italians even then had quote unquote plans. I don't know if those plans involved conquest, but they involved development with Italians leading the way. And if you're thinking maybe the British and French had issues with that, I'm sure you're right. And I'm also sure that the Ethiopians assumed that this would help their cause for remaining independent. I think the Ethiopians, like many less strong people, shall we say, don't mind the help in development, but they don't want to be taken over at the same time. So Sir Samuel and Laval talked a big game there at the General Assembly at Geneva. But when, as we say, push came to shove, I'm not sure the British and French were willing to do anything. So that's what you can go. Oh, we love embargoes, don't we? Yes, Lord. We hear about embargoes. Aren't we embargoing Russia now? Yeah. Yeah. So there you go. We have embargo, capital E's. And embargoes tend to make them mad without accomplishing the purpose. It's sort of like, yeah, I know. It's irritating to the embargo. I know, embargo-e, but it doesn't accomplish the purpose necessarily of the embargoer. Yeah, sorry. Just had to get that right. Because that, I mean, you know, and it's easy. You can imagine once they condemned Italy, the Italians, as we say on the streets, were bent out of shape. Because, you know, with the embargo comes like, you were a very naughty country, Italy. You were very bad. And we're all kind of hurt. We're not mad. Well, we're a little mad, but we're real hurt with you Italians. It's interesting how this will work out. The idea, though, is that ultimately behind the scenes, it's December of 5, excuse me. And you see who's there, two old friends. Sir Samuel Howard, there's Pierre Laval, always with the white shirt and white tie, and always with Gaulois ashes all over it. Gaulois with these ghastly cigarettes that you could smell a mile off. So anyway, so he's there. A man, you see the one with the mustache who's standing there. We'll talk about him later. His name is Bonnet. He loves appeasement. We'll talk about him later. But they're there. There's Sir Samuel. And so they have all these quote unquote closed door meetings. And, you know, it's like, what should we do? Now, they're not doing this on behalf of the League of Nations. They're doing it for themselves. That is, the British and the French. So Laval and Sir Samuel say, why don't we just basically tell Mussolini he can have a big piece of the Ethiopian pie? And then if he'll be nice to Ethiopia, then we can deal with it. Now, this is supposed to be hush hush. You can't go around telling folks stuff like this. You can imagine this is confidential. Oh boy, have we heard this one. I mean, it's like you can't, there are always leaks. If you don't think I know, it happens. And it didn't, it's just not 1935, right? Think about now. God, constantly people are always telling. Just can't keep the mouth shut. So there you go. So one of those people, guess what Howard Laval are planning? You know, it's that sort of thing. They're so excited, I guess, to be in the center. Well, I won't try to do a psychological analysis. Let's just figure something was going on. And boy, did it ever cause problems. Now, see the map with the green and white? See that area that they were going to develop? Sort of like Little Italy, maybe, right there in Ethiopia. And I guess according to the plan, it would have allowed the Italians to get part of Ethiopia, but the Ethiopians could, you can keep a lot of it and let's all just work together, give peace a chance, and all that. I mean, there are no Beatles yet, but I mean, it's like we understand how we want this to work out. And we're ready for fan hitting, and that's coming right there with a leak. Because it had all been secret before they could get Italian acceptance. It got in the newspapers, and whammo, end of Sir Samuel Howard. Go spend more time with my wife and children. Oh, I love that when they do that. Thank God, how many are spending all the time? Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's just beautiful. Yeah. Family, family number one. Yeah. So that was Sir Samuel. And I suppose that Pierre Laval was able to continue in government, but by and large, the war continued on with success for the Italians. I mean, it wasn't like a fair fight. And the embargo did not have any noticeable effect on the Italians, but it just made them mad. And at this point, they left the League of Nations. They weren't the first. You know who did it first? 1933, the Germans. So now we're mad and we're taking our toys and going home. Well, it's very far to Italy, but from Switzerland. But that is the ending of that particular struggle. Now, Chicago newspaper. Now, if we left out the word daily, we would know the newspaper, the Great Chicago Tribune. Oh, I don't know. You might be fans.
I worked there.
I know you did, but and it cost, I believe, 2 cents. Yes, it cost 2 cents, and it was Colonel McCormick was the great editor, publisher, and he in fact decided, I'm sure, on these kinds of headlines, Horquits, junk, Franco-British peace. And it's not like you say, well, wouldn't that hurt some British feelings? Or somebody in Britain would take offense. Well, they didn't care. These people from Illinois, they're called isolationists, and it's not like Anglophilia runs supreme in Illinois. There are a lot of people who say they can all go to places for all we can. So that's the idea and the ridicule here. And you might be interested in that old age pension, to think about the history and all of that in terms of the history of Social Security. But we can't get distracted as much as I'd like to, because I would have to keep you here overnight to go and do it 24/7. So yeah, you have lives and families, so we can't do that. So yeah, Chicago. And I thought this was fascinating to think in coming out of that particular film. But that expresses the reaction of everybody that this peace proposal just wasn't going to cut it. And so that was that. Now, another interesting aspect to me is the racial aspects. I don't know if you've thought about that before, but in most of our talk of invasions and so forth, we're talking about white against white, or one part of Europe against another part, and we'll have lots on that. But in this case, of course, we're talking about attacks against the people of color. Well, what about the rest of Africa? Well, yeah, but this is new. This is something that's different, because Ethiopia was one of two parts that was still independent. And in this case, people were ready, willing, and able to protest, at least in the United States. And I thought this was interesting when you see these people, and they may well have been supported by the American Communist Party. But it's in Harlem, that looks almost like a porter on a train, doesn't it, back there? But these people, and you notice, doesn't even refer to them as Italians. It just calls them fascists. So, and of course, from their perspective, this is what's really important. The fascism versus the people of Ethiopia. So the idea, why did this not go anywhere? I guess because of the fact that the American government was willing to put anything into it. And yes, there was the embargo against Italy, but in the long run, this was not going to, what should we say, pick up steam or have any particular effect in terms of the war between Italy and the Ethiopian people. But I just wanted you to see right there in the middle, I guess probably, if you all know that area of Harlem, probably Apollo Theater, Adam Clayton Powell, up that way. So up in that particular area, that there would have been, and may have been supported by the NAACP. Now, the famous speech and Haile Selassie. Again, many of us know him from 1975, and it's like, I remember my reaction was, it's like, oh, he's still around. It's like he had been, I mean, think about it. As a young ruler, December of 36. So by 1975, he was on our tests, fill in the blanks and otherwise, yeah. Probably in Cliff Notes, if you have that for 20th century history. Yeah, I haven't forgotten. But yes, that is understandable that he was there. Lord, I have a section to show you, I think. Yeah, see if that works. And
you gotta click it.
Okay.
At the League of Nations, a grave disturbance. Today, Haile Selassie comes to plead for his lost empire. He wants them to make Mussolini give up Ethiopia. The Geneva crowds are for him, but the exiled emperor will need his imperturbable dignity before the day is over. British Foreign Minister Eden, Soviet delegate Litvinov on the left, and French Premier Blum and all the statesmen, instead of helping Haile Selassie, have decided to lift the sanctions against Italy. The introduction of the emperor in English.
His Majesty Negus Haile Selassie, I call upon the first delegate of Ethiopia. The speech which you are about to hear will be given in the Amharic language.
In the shadows of the press gallery, Italian newspapermen are ready for an outbreak against the emperor whose country their country has taken, waiting for his first words.
From the platform.
Monsieur le Président, Monsieur le...
Trying to quell the disturbance, lights turned out. Again, lights out. The disturbers ejected, arrested, and he is able to make his appeal.
የሚገባውንም ትክክለኛ ፍርድ ለመጠየቅ ዛሬ በዚህ ቀርቤያለሁ። ምክንያቱም ወታደሮቹ ቦምቡ በወደቀ ጊዜ ጋዙን ነፋስ እስኪወስደው ድረስ መበታተኑን ስላወቁበት ነው።
An ovation, yes, but he gets no help. The League lifts the sanctions against Italy. Applause, and that's all.
Yeah, I mean, it's a famous speech to be sure. And it's probably the only thing until his death that I knew about him is, of course, the famous speech at the League of Nations. But obviously, they were a member of the League of Nations, but then, you know, it's sort of like put up or shut up. I mean, it's like, what are you going to do? And the answer is nothing. Because we understand that when you look at the UN, it's like there's only so far these international bodies can go. And certainly in terms of the League, they weren't willing to stop Italy in any significant way. As far as the Italian media and their response, I find that kind of interesting because you think of that as being somehow modern, you know, people being rude or, you know, stopping us. But apparently it was going on in the 1930s. So I find that very interesting indeed that the Italian media would have been so anti-Ethiopian emperor. And of course, he was long gone from Ethiopia, not to return until probably 45 or 46. Here he is with family members in a place I came to know and love. And of course, many of you have been there to Bath. Beautiful city, of course. We think of the Roman ruins, but I wonder how many, except people in the Bath Chamber of Commerce, would know about this particular site. Because I just, you know, I got all over this. You can imagine how titillating this was for me to find out that the emperor lived here during the war. And we understand from our World War II movies that, what is that called? The one about the Hastings? Foyle's War. Many of you probably saw it. It's like, you might get bombed, but it's a lot better than Ethiopia. So that would be the imperial home with his family and his various associates there in Bath. And it wasn't bad either. I mean, in terms of the place. Called Fairfield House. And just to wind this up, it is now a place for people of Ethiopian ethnicity who live in Britain. Isn't that something? Now, see, it's all including your tuition for me to tell you that. How many people know this? You'll be ahead at your next history party, okay? Have people over and say, how much do you really know about Bath? And then they'll start bringing up Roman ruins and said, well, that's interesting, but do you know this? You can beat them every time because very few know about this outside the Ethiopian community. Yeah, isn't that wild? But yes, there are apparently a lot of people originally from Ethiopia who live in Britain. and this is where they hang. So there we go. And this was the home of the emperor, and he and his family lived there until they could return home after the unfortunate incident. And there they would remain until 1975. Yes. It is interesting to note that, of course, Mussolini couldn't be Ethiopian emperor, and you're thinking, bummer. Yeah, I know. He felt bad about it too. He probably felt bad, worse than you did, because he had to make the Italian king Ethiopian emperor. Yeah. See, I mean, a lot of hurt there. You know, saying, why can't I be? You get it though. Everything has to go to the king, who didn't like him too much anyway. But good taste. So there we go. Basically, then Victor Emmanuel will now be the Emperor of Ethiopia. Haile Selassie there in Baya will be the former emperor, Emperor Emeritus, I guess. And the league's out of Italy in 1937. And maybe by this point, I mean, we're talking 36, 37. I don't want to push it. You're thinking, come on, we've got time. No, we got to take it slow here, because this relationship, like many relationships, takes some years to build. And we've still got issues that trouble us. And one starts with an A, and you know it well. It's a beautiful place. If I just say Sound of Music, you'll get it. See, I knew you would. I count on you. The idea being, of course, Austria is going to be a problem. But I'll tell you what wasn't a problem. How's that for a segue? The Spanish Civil War. Yes, indeed. And so here we go, down south. Some of you will remember from last term the name of Primo de Rivera and his son, who helped create the Falangist or fascist party in Spain. Now we are concerned with the expulsion of the monarch and the establishment of the government that many would say was pink, if not red. And I do mean exactly what it would sound. The Spanish version of the Popular Front in France. It's all like everybody's doing it. Lots of programs on behalf of working people. And lots of changes in terms of who has the power and authority. And you go like, gosh, I bet everybody was not aboard this program. You are very right about that. This Spanish Republic, Second Spanish Republic, so-called, was definitely on the left-wing side. It wasn't, let's bring us all together, because that ain't gonna happen. So there's no idea of unity. It's like, you people have run things long enough, and now it's our turn, because we represent regular people. And so Alfonso XIII was living in Paris at the time. He was the king. And you think, gosh, Alfonso XIII, wasn't he the father? Yes, he's the father of Juan Carlos. Remember him, the last? Yeah, Franco. Well, more of that later. The monarchy was done away with as an institution. Isn't that wild? I mean, talk about washing our hair. I mean, it's just like we just going a big change. And everybody's going like, we've got problems. The years then of this Republican government are going to create a lot of concern. Nice way of saying a lot of hostility and enmity from, oh gosh, what do we call it in the establishment? Remember that? Yeah, all of that. Because these radical Democrats, socialists, all of that, they're going to take some of our money. And in that day, of course, money means often land, doesn't it? Because they're going to have what's, I guess, redistribution. That's what those are the polite terms for it. Redistribute your assets to help the people. Well, anyway, whatever it was, there was trouble. Now, there was trouble in France, but possibly because France was more developed than Spain, they seemed to be able to cope with it better, these changes. I'm not saying everything was perfect, far from it, but not as in Spain. And of course, let's start with the biggie, the church. Now, I used to tease people about, if you're a Presbyterian and you want to go to church in Madrid, good luck. Because obviously this is, at least was, a very, very Catholic country. And the church, as opposed to France, they had long ago lost their lands and special privileges. May see Napoleon, right? I mean, it's like, but Spain, the church was still very powerful in the interest of creating a very strong nation state. The Spanish government, the monarchy, had prevented all these groups like Catalonia and so forth from having their independent privileges, and what we call the elite, the upper class folks, had really had control over the masses of people. And I'm sure you know, without my telling you, the masses of people in Spain were still peasants. There were working people, as in terms of industrial, there were some of that, some cities. We think of Barcelona, for example, as being one of the great cities. If you haven't been to Barcelona, I'm sure you have. Yeah. Okay, so I don't need to send you on a tour. Okay. All right. Right, okay. Yeah, now that'd be a nice trip. Yeah. But that is basically the idea of the radical changes in all of these established groups. And these established groups are saying, we've had it up to here. And that's where Franco comes along. There were other figures, but I think those of us who grew up at this time, okay, we're back to 1975. That was actually, oh, you're not going to believe this. This was on Saturday Night Live. Franco is dead. He's still dead. I mean, it was like nobody of that generation could believe it. Because really, you want to shake the television. Is it true? Could he really be? Because none of us could remember when he hadn't been dictator of Spain. So it was a big, big deal. Oh, I could just talk about 1975 for so much more than you want to hear. Yeah, I mean, I promise. But that was a very important year. So don't ever ask people if they want to hear about 1975, because I'm sure you have more. Swine flu vaccine. Yes. Yeah. I mean, there's squeaky farm. I mean, there's so much that there's too much, really. So yeah, have to keep it to ourselves sometimes. Yeah. And there he is, short fella. Antoine chose this particular picture, and see how modest, just the one little medal. Because you can imagine, you know, he had other poses and other, you know, I'm sure he had assortments that he could pull out from the Madrid uniform shop when he got in there. But he was a minor general who had command of a force there in Africa, in Spain's troops there. And when he was encouraged to lead his force, which was largely a force of people of color, to invade on behalf of the, shall we say, the ruling classes, the once ruling classes, he decided to do so. You could have a whole class about the Spanish Civil War, but I guess for our purposes, it is significant that the Germans and Italians, the Italians more than the Germans, decided to support the Spanish, who are called nationalists, as opposed to the loyalists. And the nationalists supported Franco, and they were an assortment of what today I guess we call the privileged classes, as opposed to the nationalists, or as opposed to the loyalists, excuse me, who had support from the Soviet Union, which is a very interesting fact. Now, remember, Soviet Union is quite a distance from Spain, so there will be issues of logistics, because if you're thinking about going through Portugal to get Russian support for the Spanish, I think again, because the Portuguese are also ruled by a dictator, and so that's not going to work for you. But what you do have, volunteers galore, that is to say, people who admire the Spanish Republic. They had great, I guess, what you would call publicity, media, as we see in the current war situation. I mean, everybody's on one side. I mean, it's not like, oh, I don't know, I'm sort of, you know, kind of torn. No. The idea of the volunteers on behalf of the loyalists will be very, very significant. And as we know, many Americans will be involved. Now, how you like my poster there? I think that's interesting. We'll talk more about that, but what they do as this Spanish Civil War takes off, in 1936. And believe you me, everybody is involved, knows about it. Now, if some of these nations had said, well, you know, we just can't sit by and let this go on. But they could let it go by. And the British and French, for example, I'm sure the French were just itching to get in, because let's face it, they're friends, in the Spanish government. Yeah, we want to beat up on the privileged people. But they decided through this non-intervention committee to stay out of it. Now, just imagine what would happen today if they had a What we have then, look, the Swiss, the watch people. I mean, obviously, they don't get involved, but everybody else takes it up, and including the Germans and the Italians. Oh, no. And you say, but somebody's telling a lie, not merely a falsehood. I'll go all the way and say lie. And that's the truth. I mean, but they agreed. They joined the non-intervention committee. It's amazing how people will lie to you, but they do. And in this case, we know that the support of the primarily Italians and secondarily Germans were very helpful to the side of General Franco. The Francoists, or the Franco side, started in the western part of France and then pushed eastward during the years 1936-39. There was never a question as far as Americans that we would go in, and say, we're going to save Spain or any of that. But that didn't mean that there could not be individual intervention. I believe I read somewhere, some of you all maybe remember this, that individual Americans were involved in Ukraine, that we had to help them out, to get them out. Or I think we did.
6 dead.
Yeah. But I mean, at the same time, did they not rescue some? But the idea being that the Italians and Germans supporting one side and the Soviets supporting the other. Now, who makes our poster? Oh, yeah. The Ministry of Propaganda, Big P. Yeah, we got to have that. We love our media. Look who's there. The Cardinal. Yes. And I don't mean baseball. I mean, we are talking some serious Catholicism. And look at him. Is that the sign for the Lord? Well, a certain one, but maybe not the one you're thinking about. No, the idea, of course, he's hanging out, and then look at that guy with that pomade and that mustache to make that stand up like that. Ooh, don't you know that was gross? To make it hold up that way. Don't even want to think about it. But yeah, there he is. Got his medals. And is that a stereotype or what? But that is the idea of the Prussian militarist, I guess you would say. And then, of course, we have our Arabs and Turks. And what are they doing? Well, they're evil and they're wicked. Probably they don't mean to be evil and wicked, but they are, because they're supporting Franco. Why are they supporting Franco? Because somebody told them to. Because they're part of the African forces. So they are there. Uh-oh. And look at the guy with his button And you know who that is? Old Moneybags. Yes. We may not have euros, but we've got some Deutschmarks, and we're helping to pay for them. And who are these people? They're all rated X. They're evil and wicked and nasty. And you say, gee, is this fair and balanced? No, but I don't think we are into fair and balanced at this point. They do call it propaganda for a purpose, right? Because this, of course, is all about setting it up for our cause. And our cause is the cause of righteousness. Go ahead, Ron, please.
One comment.
Yeah.
Because it turned out to be a joke. Was the Italian component. They sent the guys with the black feathers and all that. The Versaglieri. They came into Guadalajara, and they ran it. They were welcomed, quotation marks, by Lister and his Catalan anarchists.
Oh, Lord.
They attacked. The Italians ran. They brought the women too, and it became a joke, and they called it the bull run of Guadalajara.
Oh, my gosh.
Franco acted, diluted them. So you're not going to be given any part of it. Let's go back to Italy. And make the comment, these people don't fight. That was a Versaglieri.
So, yeah. I mean,
The little black feathers and all that.
didn't have. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. I really am, because you see the top of the pic, and those are the soldiers down there.
Yeah, they had-
They're waiting, so excited, seeing them down there. I know that it's like they're waving from the.
But that became a joke, and they said every time you use the word Guadalajara, which is it was a joke.
Because they weren't really, they weren't fighting. And again, he mentioned something that's very interesting to me. It's like up in Barcelona, there was a big movement of people that sound like fun, anarchists, because those of you remember chaos and anarchy in school, and some of us who may not like those kinds of things, we like order and discipline on the other side. But the anarchists, of course, as an ideology, are basically like saying, remember that old song, go where you want to go, do what you want to do. Was that the Mamas and the Papas? I can't remember. Some group back in the day. But it was like the idea, and I would hear that song and say, I guess I should like this, but I oppose this doctrine because, and I needed to let that go, because the idea of anarchy, I mean, it's like everyone is an individual, and maybe I can work some and then I cannot work some. You think that might not be a good career builder, but in anarchism, we're all going to be this if it suits you. I just want you to be happy.
Anarchy means freedom.
It does, because going way back to the Greeks, but the anarchists actually took over Barcelona, and the government had problems with them because the government, the government is sort of like we form a coalition, the socialists here, a communist there, and you say, oh, we are the world, we are the, I know you're ready. But there were troubles. They had definite problems, and those anarchists had to go.
They did fight though.
Yes, they did. They loved their anarchy. Go Big A. I mean, it's like they were very exciting anarchists. Yeah. And people often ask me, how can you be an anarchist and get together? I guess it's that idea of that freedom. And if it works for you, that's good. If it doesn't, leave it alone. But definitely not my crowd. But anyway, it's a very interesting idea. But thank you very much, because that's really interesting how you have all these different groups. So the non-intervention committee did not prevent.
Get it again.
I'm sorry.
Nope.
Well, we can just enjoy the sea of authoritarianism. Again, oh, here they are. I just love this photograph because so I wish you were here, that sort of thing. We're all there. And people came. Yeah. I see when I first saw this photograph, I thought, which very interesting, a person of color was there. And then I read, and I don't know whether this is true or not, but that some people were quite concerned that they had not been able to help Ethiopia. Again, it's an interesting theory. And so people from Harlem and other areas, because this is largely a group of New Yorkers, not only, but people from New York, people who are supporting various left-wing groups. Now, they named it after Abraham Lincoln, their group, because it sounded, PR. I mean, yeah, who wouldn't like to be the Abraham Lincoln group? That had that ring to it of Americanism. So off they were going. And I believe it was only a year or two when the last one died. Yeah, no, that's amazing, isn't it? Probably 100 plus.
Oh, yeah.
But their archives, their families, very active still in terms of maintaining their history and their traditions, because they were leaving from New York. And of course, this is very, quote unquote, unofficial, because the American government had nothing to do with it. You can bet the government wouldn't have had any support for this or anything like these people, some of whom apparently their own families didn't even know they had gone, or they would have forbidden it. So because this would have been, you don't have any business. But, this is heyday of communism, depression, and this is the cause, the righteousness of the cause of the people fighting Franco and all of that. So I just find that movement. Yeah.
Who paid them?
Who paid them? Well, I think that part, you mean, how did they
Take money.
Oh, well, I think that they were paid by their fundraisers, and of course, maybe they can sell Krispy Kreme donuts. Like, God, I think, but I'm thinking, and of course, do I need to say Moscow could help out? But and other groups like that. I'm not just saying everybody is a communist. There are other groups. But there were a lot, yes. And again, just like a lot of people were New Yorkers, but that's just where the heyday of these particular movements were. They fought
very well.
Yes.
They did very well. And fought a battle in the Chicken. And that was one of the toughest battles of Civil War. They took that town, and it cost them a lot but they took it. Today, they are idols to people.
Is that right? But there were lots of casualties, like say, yeah. So, and people would learn until much later what happened, because again, this is all very unofficial. There's not government supported or anything of the sort, except other governments, certainly not the Americans. Now, I have read that the French government actually, towards the end, better late than never, as they say, may have sent certain amounts of arms and supplies to the Republican side. But of course, it's a question, God, I'm cliche ridden. Too little, too late. Sorry. But that's the case. And again, if we compare it to the contemporary situation, it's just a matter of this non-intervention committee plus the United States' reluctance to get involved in the affairs of Europe would prevent it. But it's not that there weren't plenty of people who were lobbying. Oh, yes, particularly around the First Lady, that is Mrs. Eleanor Roosevelt. Oh, yeah. So, but these folks are definitely not individuals that we would consider to be famous as individuals. They were just in their way, and I wouldn't say American patriots so much. Their cause, though, was the support of the Spanish Republic and the understanding of what they viewed as important for the future of the world. And that's where they found it. And many of them died, didn't they, in this particular cause. You can see the progress, and I think that progress, quote unquote, because it's to note if you're a nationalist, you see the blue area because, of course, Madrid and the falling of Madrid is going to be a major cause, and there's always Portugal. But since Portugal is controlled by a more or less Franco ally, I don't know if it's so much a personal thing as just Antonio Salazar. Some of you will remember him, an economics professor. Not that all economics professors want to be dictators. I'm not saying that. But he was very much an authoritarian and a Catholic. And he was not exactly going to permit a lot of contact between the Republic and his country. So all of this is to say C-36, then you go down to 37. Again, you just can't imagine all the casualties or all the suffering and horror that was going on. I'm sure there was at the time, but they didn't have television, but I guess between radio and the movie clips they used to show before films, they were trying to get out the word of how horrible this was. And if you want to say it's almost like, think how close this was to World War II. It's right there. So we already have it. Well, obviously, this is going to make a difference, because if Italians and Germans had been in many ways responsible for the success of General Franco, you know there's going to be a time that we'll expect payment. Maybe not right away, but we expect it. On the other hand, maybe the difference is that the Germans and Italians had thought they had were not really as important. The way that we worked together in Spain was very nice. As far as the Soviets are concerned, you know, we've really got other issues. And maybe Spain is not as important as we thought. So once the Soviet aid is more or less cut off, the Republic can say adios, because it isn't going to last without Soviet support. This art showing, and this is art from the Spanish Civil War. And of course, we have the Soviet soldier there being strong, fighting against those plutocrats, cardinals and archbishops. You take that, loser. Yeah. So, yeah, you get that. All of this. Oh, and Raggedy, right? So, I wonder who they are. Losers. Yeah, that's the other side. That's why they call it propaganda, right? Yeah, we understand that clearly, but I just thought that was right. Obvious and interesting. CCCP is, of course, all about the Soviets. And propaganda doesn't cause a victory because it didn't work here, but it's important. And of course, later on, there will be novels and movies to, I would have to say, romanticize. This particular film, I'm sure many of you've seen it, with two great stars, 1943, during World War II. How about that? Would obviously be a Hemingway story that would definitely sympathize the cause of those who lost. I don't think if you saw the movie, you would ever say, well, I never really thought about Franco like that. I guess he was really a good fellow. Maybe we just didn't understand. No, I don't think it's that way at all. I mean, part of it, of course, is the story of their relationship, but part of it too is to express the sympathy. And I do, because I think many of us, like Gary Cooper and Ingrid Bergman, and maybe you've read it in literature classes. There may be Cliff Notes in case you need those. Yeah, I'm not suggesting you do that, but I'm just saying, or Wikipedia, yeah, for those of you who want to be up to date. But anyway, that too. And again, I'm not sure they would have at that particular time any idea of a film celebrating Franco's cause. So there's not an equal time. There's not a fact. This more or less was the cause that most supported. And I know the name George Orwell is a name that we all know so well. So he needs no introduction. Many of you, more yellow and black stripe. Yeah. 1984, Animal Farm. Probably have a whole collection. Yeah. Of the, greatest hits. But I think by that point, he was writing these. He may have been disillusioned by the whole thing. But boy, when he was young, Homage to Catalonia, and boy, he was hot to trot about the revolution. Oh, I want to meet some anarchists. We cannot, I know, all seems fun. The Homage to Catalonia, though, gives a very famous and significant description of that war period. A colorized version of the famous Picasso painting. And of course, he was in Paris as this went on exhibition through various places, dealing with the famous bombing of Guernica. And that will be well known. But I just thought I'd show you the color rendition because I thought that was interesting. So the Italians and Germans were out of it, but they had other things to do. And the Soviets had a little something called the purge trials because we need a cleansing. And Joe Stalin said, I'm just the man to do it. And he did. So with all of the powers out, basically by 1938 to 1939, because of the loyalists was over and they were getting, while the getting was good, as they say in the old movies. Some went to France where they ended up in intern camps. Think the Germans are coming in 1940. So it's not a good thing to be a Spanish refugee, is it? But many went to Mexico, I understand. That was one of their choices, or Cuba. Because other places. But by and large, and I understand some went back afterwards. That eventually, I don't mean during the war, I mean later. But I'm sure they didn't have nice things to say about General Franco, who led it until 1975.
Who gave him amnesty in 1947.
There you go. Amnesty, we love amnesty. So they could come back, but I'm sure they didn't appreciate it. They didn't say gracias. Yeah, exactly. I'm sure if they could have gotten a hold of it. I always think this is kind of tragic when you think these are young left-wing children, I guess you'd say. They are the families. I know these are families of like communists, Spanish communists, and they go off to Moscow. And of course, I go on this wild tear to try to find out about them. Apparently, they were brought up by communists there in the Soviet Union. And either they went back to Spain or they stayed in Russia. So that is a very interesting set of people, but it went on, you notice the dates. So it was very sad. And then you say, gosh, I know him. He reminds me of something from D-Day. Yes, that's Dwight David Eisenhower. And he is the symbol of sort of, we have to deal with him, so we accept him. I think they must have been playing the national anthem, and he and Franco met, and that symbolizes that acceptance. Spain, which had been for many years kind of like, we really don't want anything to do with you. And we'll pick up World War II, its origins next time then. Thank y'all very much. Sorry to go on.
Maybe you get those. They were looking for an atom bomb we lost. Hey, wait a minute. We're missing one there.
What do you think about? There he is in civilian.